Tonight we're working on Chapter 8. The topic is a thing called user controls. And we already learned about server controls a few chapters back. And these are like not dissimilar from server controls, the same basic kind of approach. But what is a little bit different about this is the necessity for it to actually interact with the server in order to work. That's the main difference. The thing that's neat about a user control is it's something that we can control and create. So we can create like this thing, for lack of a better description, that does a certain task or has certain features to it or looks a certain way. And then once we've created that, it becomes an entity unto itself that we can then reuse anywhere that we would like. So for example, if I came up with a really cool contact form that had certain features in it, and I really like those features, and I'm like, that would be good on a lot of different sites that I'm building, I can save that thing as a user control and then pull it into any project I want. So that's the crux of what we're going to be doing here. And notice I do have a lot of highlights in this chapter. And notice this first one, it says, great for encapsulating markup, controls, and code that you need repeatedly throughout your site. So kind of what I'm saying. So if you're seeing something that you don't want to recode, that you can package up, that's kind of a tip that you might be, something that's useful for you. Now when we create these user controls, you're going to see that we're going to be creating a different type of file, and that file is going to have an ASCX extension to it. For all intents and purposes, it really behaves like a page, except for the fact that it has, that separate extension, and its intent is to be included in a page instead of being a page unto itself. All right, when you are going to create one, you're going to end up getting an interface like this, and just like a regular page, you do have the capability basically to add a code behind page. So you can have a markup page where you have your HTML and your ASP tags and your server directives, and then a separate code page typically, or you can have the code on the page itself. But that capability mimics regular page setups. When you look at the header portion of the file that you create, you're going to notice that there's going to be a different directive, different ASP directive here, where instead of it saying page, it will say control to indicate that it's a control. So that's one of the things that lets you know that that's the case. And at this point, we're going to get started and do some coding. So I'm going to do kind of my standard thing here is I'm going to do a little bit of file management first. And basically, I'm going to be creating a version of my work. So I'm going to find my ASP.NET folder here and my folder for this semester. And then assuming that I finished everything last time. Do you guys remember if I finished all my work last time in Chapter 7? I believe I did. Thank goodness. I'm going to make a copy of my site folder, and I'm going to paste it back in, and then I'm going to rename that, and of course call it Chapter 7 Complete. Right, I'm going to go ahead and open up Visual Studio. We've been using Visual Studio 2015 in this class. One little helpful tip, and I was going to pause the recording for this, but we were doing some VM configurations in one of my other classes, and I was installing Visual Studio into this environment and didn't even realize it, but I ended up installing the brand new Visual Studio 2017, which is officially out now. So if you guys are interested in staying cutting edge, I would encourage you to go out there and download it. Just like 2015, there's a community edition that's free, and I was pretty impressed with the installer on it. It worked pretty smoothly. It had a lot of upfront options for installing that made things go without a hitch. Okay, now that we're in Visual Studio, let's go ahead and open up our site. So I'm going to do File, Open, Website. And I'm actually going to begin by collapsing down all my folders here in Solution Explorer and closing all these tabs just to get them out of the way. We may end up using some of these pages, but there's no reason for them to be open if we're not. All right. First thing that we're going to do is we are going to create a folder called Controls. And they're saying if you haven't done that already. Now, if you remember back a ways, we were working with that banner, right? So I'm noticing that I don't have that banner in here, which is maybe a little problematic. So maybe my Chapter 7 isn't quite as complete as I would like it to be. So what I'm going to do here, folks, because I do want it to be complete, I'm going to pause for a moment and pull up a completed copy. So give me a... Okay, now that I've unpaused my recording here, I'm going to confess that I'm being a little bit of an idiot because we're actually building the banner control here. I thought maybe we did it previously, but I apologize. So I did not have to close my website. So you guys feel free to laugh out loud. All right, so they are asking us to go ahead and create a folder in here called Controls. So if you don't have this folder yet, just right-click the root of your site and choose Add, New Folder, and then create a folder called Controls. Okay? I assume at this point you guys know how to do that, so I'm just going to kind of operate on that assumption. And just to clarify, because I had a question here in class, we are creating just the folder right now, not anything to go in it. That we haven't hit that step yet. The other thing they're asking us to do is create another root level folder. So right click on the root of your project and choose Add, New Folder, and call this one Images with a capital I. All right, now what they want us to do, and this will require that you have access to the source files from your textbook. So if you are working on a school machine here, you are going to need to go into Blackboard, and I'll bring Blackboard over onto the screen here. Go to the resources page, download the code files in C#, and unzip them. Once you have those unzipped, you can then navigate to that folder and you'll end up with two folders inside of it, one called Resources and one called Source. And the book is asking us to go to the Resources folder for Chapter 8, and then we are going to take these two images that are inside that folder and we are going to drag and drop them into Visual Studio into the Images folder. And you can do that directly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Visual Studio up on the screen, and then I'm going to Alt-Tab back to my File folder. And you can see I just drew a selection around both of them. And then I'm just going to drag and drop them right into the folder. Just like that. I'll pause the video for a second to make sure everybody gets that, because I know it might take you a second to find the source files, unzip them, and perform that action. So quick pause. All right, our next step now is to right-click the Controls folder, choose Add, New Item, and this is the spot where we're going to choose Web User Control. They want us to name this banner, B-A-N-N, and I am using a capital B. It will automatically add the extension of ASCX, but if you want to type it in, you can do that too. Make sure that code behind is selected, so place code in a separate file does have a checkbox. And then go ahead and click Add. As they were showing in the book, notice that we do have a little indicator here that we are working with a control as opposed to a page. Notice that there's basically nothing inside of it because it's empty. But at this point, we're going to switch over to Design View because it allows us basically to do some things kind of quickly and easily. And it's kind of like a slick way to work, frankly. All right, now they do want us to open up the panel here, and in the standard category, they say there is a panel object. We want to drag that onto the page and drop it within the dotted box. And I know it's really hard to see, but if you look really close here, there's that little dotted box that goes all the way across the screen. Just make sure it goes inside there. All right, once you have this panel dropped in and it's activated here, you can come down to the Properties window, and they want you to change the ID. So instead of it being Panel 1, it should be a vertical panel. Capital V, capital P. Next thing they want us to do is grab an image control and drop that into the panel itself. Once again, we're going to drop down to the Properties window here. And then we want to change the image URL All right, so in the image URL, we're going to click inside there, and you notice how it pops up a little, like 3 dots here, call those ellipses, right down here. You click that, and it brings up a file window, and of course, we're going to navigate to our images folder. And at this point, they want us to select the one that's 120 by 240. And then click OK. They also want us to locate the property entitled alternate text. And for those of you, fresh to HTML5, HTML5 as a standard requires that you add an alt attribute to your images to pass validation. So it's always a good habit to put something in there. I know a lot of designers leave it blank, but one thing you should always remember with an alt tag, if for some reason your images don't load, that alt text is what will appear in the person's window. So let's say the image is broken or your server's not working right, it doesn't load, at least you'll have a little snippet of text that might say banner or picture of a dog or something like that. So please keep that in mind. They want us to type, this is a sample banner. So that's what I'm typing. All right, now they want us to switch back over to source code view so we can see what we created. You can get an example of what code was automatically generated. And then they want us to check something, and what they're trying to check is if our panel control has height and width attributes that were added by default, remove both of them. So in this case, that didn't happen. So the panel control here is this one, the one that has the ASP panel tag. And if you look, through the tag, you'll see an ID attribute and a run at server attribute, but there's not a height and a width. with. And I think that what happens if you're using older versions of Visual Studio, I'm not sure if 12 does it. I think 12 might do it, but I think 10 does it for sure, where it automatically drops those in. So if it does drop in height and width in this spot, make sure to remove those because it's going to conflict with what we're trying to accomplish in this exercise. Next thing they want us to do is take this image tag here and wrap it with an anchor tag. So because this is kind of a long line, I'm actually going to put the anchor tag itself on a separate line. So I'm going to do a href, and they want us to set the link to go to http:// and of course p2procks.com. Now see that last slash is optional there. And then don't forget to put a closing tag after that image. And you see how it automatically generated it up here, and I missed it, so I'm now deleting it. All right, the other thing they want us to do is add a target attribute. So one way you can do it is just by clicking inside the tag and then just type target, and they want us to set it to blank. Can anybody here in class remind me of what that does? When I say target blank, what is that going to do? That's the correct answer. These days, the default action for that is it opens up a new tab. In the old days, it would open up a whole new browser window. And that's not a bad thing to do. It's not a bad thing to do when you want to make sure that people also stay on your site, but you want to take them somewhere else at the same time. All right, so the whole point here now is in step 11, just double check that your code looks like the code that's in the book. So just that's our checkpoint there. All right, they don't want us to do anything further at this point, and we're just going to go ahead and save it, and then they said just go ahead and close that control for right now, so that's what we're going to do. Now, once you've created the user control, you see we didn't create anything particularly fancy, but think of the logistics of what we just did. We created a little area of a page with ASP tags that's going to hold a banner image. So if you're building a website, you might have a bunch of ads on it. And in this case, it looks like it's an ad for ourselves or Planet Rocks or whatever. But why go through the process of every time you do a new page of recreating that code? All you have to do is create the new page and literally drag and drop that thing over to your new page, and there's the banner. You're done. Now, granted, it's a pretty simplistic example because there's not really a lot of code there and there's not a lot of images, but it could be something much more complex. But the whole point is, if you're reusing it, you create it once, and then you just use it. You don't have to keep recreating it. So that's the logistics of why. All right. Now the next step for us when we're about to use a user control, we have to add what we call the register directive, and that is whether we're going to be dumping it onto either a content page or a master page. In terms of how the browser ends up rendering the page, it doesn't really care where the code is being stitched together from. So control can be added to the master page as well as the content page. Notice that that directive also points out the fact that we are bringing in that user control from a particular spot. So it names the control. or indicates the control, the file for it, the name of it, and then it will also have a prefix that we throw in there. And that prefix then allows us to address that control directly. So if you look at the very bottom of the page here now, if we create the control, notice the register, it points right to where the control is located, so it indicates the folder and the file. Once it's registered like that, then instead of using an ASP tag to get it and to use it, we use that little tag that we just created for user control to get it to work. Kind of an interesting approach. All right, let's give that a try. They want us to open up the Frontend Master, so go ahead and locate that. Master Pages and Frontend Master. And it says, be in design view, so let's do what they say. It says, locate the drop-down list that enables you to select the theme. Position your cursor right after the drop-down list. So here, you see where it's flashing? And then press enter. 3 times, okay, 3 times. Right, was that 3 times? Close enough. It says, from Solution Explorer, drag the banner control into the empty spot you just created. So I'm going to grab the banner, and I'm going to drop it right here. The banner. And now, all right, with any luck, it'll look just like this, which is similar to what they have in the book. Now they want us to switch back to the source code view and take a real quick look at a couple different things. Look at the very top of your file and notice the addition of a register directive. So we have this thing up here that says master, right, because that's what we have, a master file. And then because we're using a user control, it registers that user control with this page. And then where the control is located in the document, notice the format of the tag where it says user control 1 or UC1 banner. And that allows it to appear on the page. They're asking us now to save the changes, so if you haven't yet, please do. And then go ahead and close it. So let's just follow what they're saying. Our next step is to open up the monochrome CSS file, and if you remember where that's located, it's in the App Themes folder, monochrome folder, and monochrome CSS. And then add the following code. And what I'm doing here is I'm kind of scrolling through here carefully. I say that a little pensively. All right, and I notice there is no style set for image, at least not one that I saw. Did I scroll through the whole thing? I sure did. All right, of course I could always do a Control F, do a find, and sometimes manual is seemingly better. And we're going to add this style here. And a very simple little style. Let me explain what this does. In earlier iterations of HTML and earlier versions of the browsers we currently use, if an image was wrapped with a link, an anchor tag, some browsers would highlight the image with a blue outline to show that it was a link. That stems from the old days of HTML. So you would put an anchor tag around something, and it would highlight that image with a blue box around it, so it was really clear to you that that's a linkable image. That went out of favor. People just basically don't do that anymore. But in order to make sure that some older browsers, Internet Explorer, previous I think to version 8 or something like that, would put that blue box around there. So in order to make it not appear, you put in this line of code that forces that border to be 0, even if the browser wants to add the blue border to show that it's linkable. You will see people using this technique. But this is kind of fair warning too. If you're ever working, out in the field, and as is common in a lot of, enterprise and corporate environments where their configurations are locked and they are using Internet Explorer or older browsers, sometimes you do have to make this consideration. So if you all of a sudden see a blue line around your image, you know where it's coming from, and you know the fix. So the author is doing that on purpose here. And then he's also saying that we should add the same CSS to the dark gray theme as well. So I'm opening up that CSS file all the way to the bottom, pasting it in, and saving it. All right, make sure everything is saved, so go ahead and click the Save All button if you're not sure. And then it says right-click the default file in the root of the site, and then choose View in Browser. And of course, it's jumping up on my second screen here, so let's bring it over. All right, and now you can see the banner is jumping up on the page. Let's switch over to the monochrome theme, and there's the banner on that page. All right, author then does go through explaining how it works, and I think I've kind of already done that for you. All right. The other thing that is kind of useful as well is instead of registering the control so that it can be active in one file. Now granted, we put it on the master page, so any page that's built on that master page will have that registered. But if you added it to a specific page or you had multiple master pages, it might behoove you to actually take and register that control on a global level, and the spot where you do that is in your web config file. So that's going to be our next step here. So I'm going to jump back over to Visual Studio. If you have a little stop button, hit it, but you probably shouldn't at this point. And then it wants you to make sure that you're opening the web config file that is in the root of the site. All right, we are now on step 2, which kind of goes from page 293 to 294. And what they want us to do is locate the pages entry. Now, pages, this is using an XML tag format, folks. And pages is a self-closing tag here. You noticing that? What we're going to have to do is switch it from a self-closing tag, to a tag that does close on its own, like that. And then add the controls code that I'm copying from our text as I speak, and then paste it in between those two. So ultimately, this is what you need to do. And just to recap that, this tag originally was like this. I removed that slash, added a closing tag, and then pasted in this code. Once you've successfully completed that action, hit your save button, make sure that that gets locked in. And then it says close the file. All right, next step, as you might anticipate, and maybe you did, maybe you don't, but what we need to do is open up that master page again. And it says locate the banner control in the sidebar area and change the UC1 to rocks. So we're going to come down here, and this little highlighted snippet of code is going to be changed to match the control name that we just created. Case does have to match. All right, next thing that we need to do is scroll all the way to the top of this file, and we want to remove this entire directive, the one that was added in the last exercise. So conceptually what we're doing here is you're seeing two different ways to kind of register user controls. The way that we put it into the master page originally is the technique that we would use if we were using it on a singular page or on the master page. But what if we start adding multiple masters? You still want it to appear on everything. It's sometimes better to just put it in the web config file, and then we don't have to have this register directive here. So we're deleting that because basically at this point it's not necessary. And go ahead and save your work. Once again, they want us to right-click the default ASPX file in the root of the site, and then choose View in Browser. And if we did our work correctly, we should still see the banner using both themes. All right, I'm moving down now to the bottom of page 296. And the author starts talking about adding logic to your user controls. That means basically writing code that will sit with your control. Now, that gives your controls the ability to do stuff aside from just sit there. And what's useful when you're working with your own controls is sometimes being able to create basically what we call our own data types by virtue of creating an enumeration. Those of you, and I'm not certain it would be many of you or any of you, is anybody here in the software program as well as the web program? Okay. So if you guys, have you had advanced micro programming yet? Okay. When you get to that class, you'll learn about this concept of enumeration, but basically it allows you to create your own data type, and I'm not really sure what to say beyond that. It's kind of like creating your own class in Java, and then you can give it its own properties and utilize it in your own way. And in this case, what we are going to do is we're going to create an enumeration called direction that's going to allow us to dynamically switch our banner from being vertical to horizontal. And it's going to have two states. So what we're doing here is we're basically going to declare our own data type called direction and the two values that it will hold. All right. All right, so let's move on to the exercise here and get that to happen. First thing he says here is start by creating the enumeration. So to do this, we're going to go to the app code folder. May as well give it a click. And then give it a right click, add new item. Select C#. And then we're going to add a class file. And if you're like me, I'm not seeing class here, so I'm not going to go hunting. I'm just going to come up here and type class. Boy, I have sharp students. He noticed that I'm adding it to app themes and not app code, so no wonder I didn't see the class file. So make sure it's app code, right click, add new item, and make sure you're using C# here, and select class as the file type. They want us to name this direction, capital D. And when you're all done, just click Add. And then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to clear everything inside of it. And we're going to add the code from the book, which looks like this. As soon as I can copy it. Just like what we saw in the book. And just once you're done, just save it. And if you want to close it, go ahead and close it. That's what the book recommends. But then we're going to switch over to the banner file, and we're going to expand that little triangle there. And I'm noticing that I made a mistake. You guys see my mistake? Yeah, what is it? I created that banner. Yeah, I created it as a VB file, not a C# file. That is a tragic mistake. All right, a couple minute pause here while I completely recreate my work. Ready? Or actually, you know what? I'll record my fixing because maybe you guys did the same thing. How about that?
I did, I noticed it at the top of your control, it says VB, and I kept looking at mine, and it was C#.
All right, well, I'm going to be deleting that, and then I have to recreate all the work I just did. So I'm going to be going back to the beginning of the chapter here, and maybe you guys can guide me. Yeah, I got a lot of work to do here, don't I?
What would happen if you just went back and changed that language to C#?
I could do that, but there's so many little trails that it leaves that I'm afraid I might break something. It's easier, actually, in many cases, just recreate it rather than try to correct the code. So, yes, I could rename it. Yes, I could go into the files and manually change everything. But I do have a concern that it wouldn't work quite right. So, C#. And it's silly that I didn't notice that before. They want us to do design view and then put what, a panel, right? The panel should be named vertical panel. The image URL. Oh, I got to grab an. Wait, I got to put an image control in here too, right? Is that how it went? There's the image control. The image URL, of course, was that banner, the 120 by 240. And they did want us to include some alt text with that. This is fun because I'm like recreating all the homework. Oh, did you see what I just did? Let's fix that. All right, then they want us to switch to markup view. See all the stuff I'm having to recreate here? They wanted me to add an anchor tag. That, of course, takes us to Planet Rocks. That needs to wrap around the image. they also wanted us to add target blank. And now I'm going to go to the Frontend Master, and we don't have to worry about it, the register thing, that's already been removed. But we do have to worry about the web config file. But notice, this still points to the right spot, right? That hasn't changed, so I don't really have to mess with that. So then my real concern is on the Frontend Master, that I still have the right directive there. So that should all be okay. So what I'm going to do now, I think it's essentially fixed. I am going to go ahead and look at that default page just to make sure that it's loading up, and I'll bring my browser back over, and it is loading. Tried both views. Okay, thank goodness, right? Not too disastrous. Sometimes that can be disastrous. I'm very thankful that it wasn't. Okay, so now we've created our own enumeration, and we've saved it. And I'm looking at step 4 now at the bottom of page 299, just if you want a point of reference. And they wanted us to open up the code behind for the banner ASCX, which now has the right file extension. And then they want us to add some properties here. Now they have a little tool that they're trying to guide us to use, and it says, step 4 says, to help you create properties, Visual Studio comes with a handy code snippet. To activate the snippet in C#, type prop, and then press tab twice. So where do I put that? Here? Press tab twice. Now, do you think I did the right thing? No. So what did I do wrong? Needs to be where outside? Now you're seeing the get and the set, right? And we do need to give it a name. And here, you know, they're kind of throwing out a data type, but we created our own data type, right? So it's going to be direction, and we're going to change the name of it to display. I like that it put me in the wrong spot there. So you should have something that looks like this. Those of you that I currently have in my Java class, wouldn't it be cool if we could just do our gets and sets like this? So that's one thing I really do like about C# is they have this like real abbreviated approach to doing this. All right, now we're going to jump over to the ASCX file, so the parent file to this one. And we're going to copy the entire ASP panel tag, so this whole thing. Brother-in-law calling from the state of Washington. Kind of an odd call. Not that you guys care, I suppose. But. All right, and now we want to paste it right below this one. And apparently I didn't copy it right. Let's try copying it again. paste the whole thing. And then we're going to make some adjustments to it. So instead of calling it vertical panel, and isn't that interesting? I copied this whole panel, and when it pasted in, it didn't paste the same ID. Isn't that weird? It was intelligent enough to know that, hey, that's not going to work. You can't have two things with the same ID, so it changes it for you. But we're going to change this to horizontal. And we're going to change the path of the image. So instead of this image, we're going to switch it to the one that's 486 by 60. So really all you have to do is change the numbers here, 486 by 60. Now if that link happens to not be right, it'll underline. So just be real careful with that. Then we go back to the code behind page, and inside the page load method, we're going to add a switch statement that is going to dynamically adjust to the state of our self-declared data type direction. And we have two states for it. One is horizontal and one is vertical. And all that does is it triggers the visibility property for the panels to either on or off. So if we have ourselves set to horizontal, the vertical becomes false and the horizontal becomes true for visibility, and vice versa for vertical. Okay? And that's going to be the thing that allows it to dynamically switch between the two views. All right, so I saved that to make sure that we don't lose the changes. Now we're going to go back to the master page once again, the Frontend Master. And they want us to locate our banner. Okay, so here it is. And they want us to add a little something to it. And basically what we're going to add is that attribute that we created. So we're going to add display direction, horizontal. So really what we're telling it here is when the front page master first loads, we want this to come up horizontal. I guess that makes sense, but what if it doesn't fit that space horizontally? That can create a little bit of a problem. So now they're kind of leading us down this path intentionally, but they do want us to save everything, so make sure everything's saved, and then right-click default view in the browser and take a look. And here it is, breaking exactly as we would anticipate, right? Certainly doesn't fit that space, but it sure tried to put it in. Switch over to the dark gray, did the same thing there. So apparently there's a scenario here where it does work and doesn't work, and in this case it looks like this one kind of works because the page is wider, but really neither one of them actually properly works. All right, so then we're going to come back in here and we're going to switch this back, not switch it back, actually switch it to display direction vertical, and then save it. You should be able to go back to your browser and refresh and have it pop back to where it was. And then you can make sure you can hit that refresh button a bunch of times, just make sure it actually is reloading. All right, so now we're going back, Visual Studio, and this time they want us to open up the About Us page. I'm going to start collapsing down some of these folders here so it's easier to see stuff. All right, so here's our About Us page, and we are in markup view, and then it says here in the content placeholder for CP main content, that's the second one, it says add some text describing you or your organization, the region you created the site. I guess I'm just going to put in, I created this because I had to. Yeah, and can't end with a split infinitive either, because I had to do it or else. All right, they want us now to switch over to design view. Boy, that doesn't look like my page, does it? Oh, but it does. And they want us to, it says drop the banner ASCX control from Solution Explorer onto the design surface right below the text you just added. So the only point of us adding the text is kind of as a marker. All right, so let's do that. And that's going to be hard to do. I'm looking at this and I don't think I can do that. Can I? I'm going to actually make a little space for it. Let me grab that and drop it in. I dropped it right inside the content panel. Isn't it interesting now that the control shows both the vertical and the horizontal? Because the truth is, in the control, the code for both is present. The visibility of each is controlled by that switch statement. The default state is vertical, which is set in the master file. So you can probably already anticipate that there's going to be an adjustment that's made. So step 12 says, select the user control we just added in design view and change the display direction over here in the properties window to horizontal. Now, isn't that fascinating though, that this control that we added, we created our own data type, which then becomes attached to the object and appears in the properties window. Isn't that cool? So it kind of gives you maybe, hopefully opens up your mind a little bit to the fact that you can kind of create your own custom properties for things and use them to control your programs. Because in essence, anything that's over here in the properties window, you can code to it. You can code to those properties and make them do things and change those properties. So that's a pretty important concept. So go ahead and save this page. In fact, probably a good idea to hit Save All. And then let's go ahead and look at the About Us page. So I'm going to right-click About Us and View in Browser. And notice that the horizontal banner is appearing here in the document, right where I placed it. Okay, our next step now is bottom of page 302, top of 303, I suppose. We're going to be adding in the capability to do a little bit of navigation attached to this. So we're going to open up the code behind file for the About Us page. So expand your little arrow here, click on the code behind. And inside the page load method, we're going to add this little bit of code. Oh, isn't that fascinating? It is not finding my data type. Is that what I named it? Well, at this point, I guess I'm not going to worry about it. All right, I'm going to go to the page, and it's asking us to just verify that it has an ID of banner 2. Does yours have an ID of banner 2? So that it matches? I'll assume that's a yes. All right, next thing they want us to do is go back to design view here, and they want us to add a button. And I'm trying to figure out where the heck they want us to put it. Okay, but this is one of those things where I think the way they wrote the instructions in step number 2, if you're reading them like I'm reading them, I think they're a little confusing. It says switch to design view, add a button control by dragging it from the standard category of the toolbox on top of the banner ASCX control. Got that? So I'm going to take the button and drop it on top of the control. So you see how that both objects changed as I did that? Oh, I see. Okay, I gotcha. I wasn't in the right mode, or was I? Switch to design. I was in the right mode. Okay. All right, I'm very pensively following the instructions in the book because I think they're not very well written at this juncture, which does happen with textbooks. But they want us to go ahead and load up this page. So go ahead and save the file, and then bring up the About page in your browser. And if you go ahead and click the button, well, isn't that an interesting effect? Notice how it switched from one but not to the other? Let me do a refresh on that. All right, let's relaunch it. Certainly worked the first time, right? So what we're going to do in order to kind of solve the problem that's happening right now is we're going to add some code that's going to allow us to basically adjust the view state of what we're working with. Apparently the code that we have here needs to be added directly below the property that we added earlier. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to the custom display direction thing that we created earlier. So we're going to be here. And I'm putting it on the wrong page, right? You guys need to stop me when I'm doing that. They want it to go here and put it right in that spot there. So you want to grab that code and drop it in. So what's happening here is it's allowing us the capability of maintaining the state, understanding that we switched from one to the other, and then it's going to give us the capability to switch back. That's what this code is going to do. Or help us do, I should say, because it's not the entirety of all the changes we need to make. The other thing we need to do is switch over to the markup view for the control. Isn't that an interesting on-screen pattern? And then we need to locate the two panels, and right where it says target blank, right after that, we're going to add this code. And then for the horizontal one, we are going to add this code. Oh, we got an extra bracket there. And save it. Back over to the code behind view. We're going to change the page load method, and we're going to add a couple lines of code in each one of the case statements to make sure that we trigger that new method so that we can switch from horizontal and vertical and back. And I'm double checking to make sure I put them in the right spot here, and it seems like I did. So again, save your work, don't lose what you've done so far. Then one more change here. Back to the code behind file for the About Us page, so we're About Us ASPX.cs. And we're going to add, and actually I should say replace this code here with this. Go ahead and save. And then it's asking us to try to bring it up in the browser again. So I'm going to right click and view in browser. And hopefully this time I got some problems here, don't I? The link works, so that part's fine. So now I got to figure out what my problem is. And one thing that I'm kind of concerned about, frankly, is the fact that maybe Chrome is caching this site. So I'm actually going to try it in Firefox. So I'm going to switch myself here to Firefox. The button doesn't do anything. The link seems to work. So I still have a little bit of a problem. Anybody else having the same issue? Nobody? Bueller? All right, it took us a little while here in class to kind of like step through this and figure out what we're doing wrong, but then I ended up reading the last step here. And the whole point of putting that button in earlier is every time we would hit it, it would force a post back. And the post back would trigger the control back to its default state, so it switched. And then when we hit it again, it wouldn't switch back. And the whole thing that we did allowed it basically to maintain its state even if the button was clicked. And I know I'm seeing the blank stares in the room. It's exactly what it was supposed to do. Now the point is, it's not going to switch states like that. It's going to maintain its state because we need it to stay horizontal there and not switch. Okay. All right, folks, that wraps the chapter. We'll see you in the next one.